Let me set this. Everything needs to be reset.
We are ready to live stream. Please press record. You're good to go.
Oops, sorry.
Will you know how many viewers you have, or get out there and that's kind of talk?
But it will also be recorded so that people can watch out here.
Reset it. Again, live streaming, so you can take advantage of that in the future, both for town halls as well as for CPC meetings. And I think I can mention that we've kind of tweaked this meeting based on some lessons learned from our prior meeting, just to try to make the engagement and all of the activities in the meeting kind of a little more user-friendly. So at the very end, I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about administrative issues like the CPC chair role. And we were originally going to have Danny Ledesma back here to talk about the renaming process. She was at both the town hall and the last CPC meeting. Unfortunately, she has a conflicting commitment this evening. So what we're going to do is put together some material to share with all the members about the renaming process. But yes.
I'll wait. I guess I'll wait and hear what
Yeah,
that
well,
is, yeah.
we can go over that towards the end. So I'll introduce Becca Cavell from Bora.
Hi, and I think actually before we even do that, we wanted to maybe do a little bit of identification of people in the
Yes.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So I will I'll come back to that schedule in just a moment, but just in terms of identifying who we are, because we're realizing that we're not consistently being clear about that. So I'm Bora, I'm Becca with Bora, project manager for the design team. And everybody who's a member of the design team, can you stand up and raise your hand? So make sure you know who we are.
We also have name tags.
Yeah, we have name tags as well. So we have various folks in the room. I think we'll identify everybody here. And then if you guys sit down or hands down, then let's have staff, PPS staff identify themselves. Great. Oh, now we've got people been doing double duty. Thank you. Now, members, CPC members, so Comprehensive Planning Committee members, whether you're staff members or not, if you could all please stand and raise your hand. I think, Steve, I think you're a CPC.
Oh, I was.
Yes. And I think, are you also a member of the CPC?
I'm on this committee.
Yes.
Here today.
Yes, this committee.
Yes.
You're a member of this committee, this meeting here today. Could you please stand? I'm sorry, could you please stand again? Just to be sure. Okay, Steve, I really think you. Thank you. Okay, great. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 folks. Thank you very much for being here. And then we have a new group of people here, our CDOs, our community design organizers. So if you could please stand and identify yourselves as well.
That's this pin, right?
Yeah, you got your pin on. You're awesome, Clea. Thank you for being here. I thought, no, so 2, not 3. I thought we were expecting Tay's on its way. Okay, so we should have at least one more coming. So thank you for that. And we might have some latecomers coming in. And I have my phone on because we put a note up at the door because it's locked. So people might call me. So forgive me if to let people in. That's just helpful for us. So coming up, I'm going to do agenda first and then go back to the schedule here. So we were intended to start at 6:30. We're running a little late. I think we can make up time. We're going to have Corey Squire with Bora talk about sustainability for 15 minutes. Last time there were a lot of questions around sustainability that were really great questions. We're going to limit this presentation to 15 minutes to make sure, including questions. If we have time for questions, Corey will speak fast. I will speak fast now, just to keep us on track. We have a community engagement 15-minute session for Kareem, where he will introduce the CDOs and talk a bit more about their role in this project, as well as other things that Co-Locate has been doing out in the community. And then Chandra from Lever, our partner architect here, will lead an interactive exercise around some design drivers. We have a 5-minute break. There's food here. You can all go grab anytime you want. You don't have to you can hear us if you're over there. Don't worry about doing that. And then Jeannie and the full team will lead you through, she'll do a presentation about some site planning scenarios, and then we're going to ask you to work in breakout groups at your table, and we will all join you at the tables as well to talk through your feelings and as you begin to evaluate those schemes. There will be no prevailing winner tonight. That's not our intention. We just want to hear you compare and contrast the schemes that Jeannie shows you. And then towards the end of the evening, and it is a 2.5-hour agenda, so it's a long agenda. We're going to talk about the land acknowledgement statement, some more information about the chair role and co-chair role for this committee. Sounds like we're rain checking, so we've gained 5 minutes already on the renaming process. There will be a public comment period at the end if we have members of the public here, and we'll talk about next steps. So I'm going to take straight back to our schedule, which has sort of fallen off the end of the page, but that's okay. So the schedule goes through the end of the year, through the end of December. This is the third meeting that you, as members of the Comprehensive Planning Committee, have been invited to participate in that sequence of meetings. There are some additional meetings, sustainable workshops, open houses, community design workshops, and so on. But there are 7 of these meetings that are happening through November. This third meeting, this is the second version of the third meeting. Some of you were here for the first version of that meeting 2 weeks ago. We did it twice because we know that coming back to school can be very disruptive, and not everybody's schedule allowed you all to be in the same place at the same time. So we did one just before school started, and now this one just after school started. We hope the school has started okay for everybody. And here we are in September. We can't quite believe it. So this is our array of CPC meetings. We have the content for each of those meetings here, and an important date we're asking everybody to hold for a community design workshop. That's a community-wide workshop. So ask your friends, tell your neighbors, please come on October 15th. Please hold that date, and we're going to be issuing some more information about exactly how that Saturday is going to be organized, whether it's drop-in or a series of repeated sessions. But we'd like you to plan to be here probably for a couple of hours at least on that Saturday, if you possibly can, and really encourage people to come. So with that, we're going to hand this over to talk about sustainability.
All right, thank you. Climate justice. Hey everyone, my name is Corey Squire. I am Sustainability Director at Thor Architects, and I'm also going to be the sustainability lead on this project. So what does that mean? A lot of what that means is to be determined next week at our Sustainability Visioning Workshop. So I'll start with the plug for that, and I will finish with another plug as well. But what I want to do today is kind of lay kind of the climate sustainability basis of a large discussion at the beginning of this design process, which is where the building is. And give a little bit of background on sustainability. What is sustainability? How we're thinking about it, and how it serves as a lens to inform the decisions that we're going to make. There we go. But I thought I'd start by asking the group, what does sustainability mean to you? It's a broad word. It means different things to different people. It has different connotations, some good, some less good. What ideas kind of come up when you hear this word? Love to hear from someone. My crowd today, yes.
Using as few natural resources as possible.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, definitely.
Of course.
Observing what we're using, or being very intentional about what we're using. Now, obviously, using as few natural resources as possible would result in us not doing anything. And we want to we want to build a great new school. So then it's very much about thinking about how we can get more, maybe with less impact. Any other thoughts on sustainability?
I think it's thinking about the future as well as what you're doing today.
I think that's really, really important. Yeah, there are people who will live in the city in the future, who haven't been born yet, who will go to this school. They don't have advocates unless we are the advocates, as we think about kind of the needs of the future and the experience of the future when we're designing. So yeah, really good idea. Really good thoughts, really good ideas. What I want to focus on is kind of a subset of sustainability, which is sustainable design. and provide a little bit of kind of the lens, at least for architects and from the design team, how we think about sustainability. It's about this idea of better design and broader design, right? Buildings have been designed for a very long time. There's been different ways of thinking about what is good design. And then there's this idea of like the typical way that architecture happens. Sustainable design is above and beyond what I'll call traditional practice or typical practice. It's about zeroing in on what matters. So there are a lot of decisions. Materials that we're going to use, obviously, space layout, site planning. But what are the ultimate impacts of those decisions? How does the decision we make impact, let's say, the ability of a student to concentrate or the health of the occupants of the building? Informed and intentional decisions. Super quick, I'm not supposed to take questions.
Okay.
But if you have something quick. Within 15 minutes. Okay, thank you. Sorry, informed and intentional decisions, making sure that we look through each of the design decisions through lenses of their broader impact. Their impact for students, the impact for the community, impact for the ecology, impact for the global planet. All these things have to factor into how we're making decisions. Anticipating the future. We know that the climate is changing. Portland specifically is dealing with all sorts of, and will continue to deal with all sorts of kind of adverse weather conditions, heat waves, wildfire smoke inundations, potential extreme rainfall events. How do we anticipate these and plan for them within our design? And then investing in people. So ultimately, a building is about the people who learn in it, who work in it, who spend their time here. And how do we make decisions so that whatever we end up doing really benefits these people? The other idea is broader design. We touched on this a little bit. Historically, there's been this sphere of consideration that designers or architects or planners have used when making decisions around buildings. Right? In traditional practice, maybe we consider budget, the schedule, the appearance primarily. And then all these other important things, health, community, resilience, the future, might be afterthoughts. And sustainable design, the way that we want to interpret it, is we're broadening this sphere of considerations. So all those other things, health, ecology, the whole planet, is going to be just as important as what has traditionally been already considered. So this is a super exciting time. Portland Public School Board put out this climate response policy in March of this year. This is the first major building that's going to be designed and built based on this policy. When Portland adopted this was national news. This is an ambitious, forward-looking policy. It's also new and potentially difficult. But this is our opportunity to lead on this issue, kind of from the perspective of this community within the school district, but also within the school district, the city, nationally and globally. The policy looks at two major things, or we'll touch on these two major things right now. It's reduction in greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030, and 100% net zero emissions for the school district by 2040. Like, extremely ambitious. The way that we will achieve this is by designing slightly differently than it's been designed in the past, right? This building will need to look at the energy goes into the materials that are constructed, and also look heavily at the energy efficiency and the emissions that will result from this project. Because this is such a significant project, and because this goal is only 7 years away, or a little bit more than 7 years away, of this 50% reduction, the design of Jefferson High School will have a major influence on whether the school district achieves this policy or not. So this is the opportunity that we've been dealt, which is super exciting. Yeah, major part of the story. So I want to give a little bit of primer just on carbon, just to make sure we're all on the same page, how this whole thing works. So carbon is in a lot of different things, right? All living things are made of carbon, and most of our energy sources are made of carbon as well. Right? We can mine oil, gas, coal, like fossil fuels used to be made of living things. Yes, and then we can, let's see, potentially burn these things contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, warms the planet, and results in all these really bad outcomes. So the problems that we're facing, the ultimate cause of wildfire, smoke inundation, heat waves, drought, sea level, all of this is because we are burning too much fossil fuels. We're emitting too much carbon into the atmosphere. Now, there are solutions, right? And buildings play a big role in the solution to this. Specifically, buildings that are built of wood, buildings that could potentially sequester carbon rather than emit. So buildings contribute to carbon emissions, contribute to greenhouse gases, contribute to global warming in two major ways. One is through what's known as operational carbon. Operational carbon is the carbon emitted from burning fossil fuels that generate energy for the ongoing operations of the building. So we use lights, we use air conditioning, we use heat, we use whatever else. And the more efficient the building, the less carbon emitted to generate that energy on an ongoing basis. There's also embodied carbon. This is the energy that is used and the carbon emissions that result from the construction, manufacture, transportation of the materials that go into the building. And these are the two areas that we're going to focus on to be able to achieve that PPS policy. These are the major strategies. Using existing buildings or building out of wood is how you decrease the embodied carbon associated with the construction. And then energy efficiency and solar panels, how you decrease operational carbon. We'll be focused on both of those kind of throughout this design process. But initially, we have to discuss where the building is, what it consists of, what it's made of. So embodied carbon is kind of one lens through which we'll look at today's conversation about the siting of the building. And these are the two options, basically. Preserving an existing building, there is carbon that was already embodied into this. So the materials, the energy that it took to bring the materials on site, to manufacture the materials that currently make up this building, that's already been emitted. We don't have to emit anything else to be able in order to kind of build a new building. The problem is that a seismic retrofit requires a lot of new steel and concrete. So if we want to preserve some part of this building, it's not as simple as just saying, this is the lower embodied carbon solution because the building already exists, because there will have to be significant work done to the building. Now, if we don't preserve part of the building, or even the part of the building that we're going to build, we really want to focus on wood. Building out of wood, especially sustainably harvested and managed forests, will sequester carbon, allow the trees to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, and then we store that carbon in the structure. So it was a little bit quicker than last time, so maybe I have time for one or two questions.
Maybe one.
I have time for one question. Do you want to ask your question?
I have something else.
Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. I'm curious if there's a reason to not build with wood. Like, if we're saying we're gonna build a new building, is it like, well, it's got to be steel and concrete? Like, what circumstance would that make sense?
So there's not. That's actually a really good question. There's no inherent benefit to building out of steel and concrete, but most buildings are built out of steel and concrete, which means that if you just go along with the flow of traditional practice, you end up with a steel and concrete building. In order to build out of wood, you have to be very intentional about the design, intentional about the process, and it means we have to do things in a certain way. I don't think that there are any sacrifices, but the reason this has to come up at the beginning of the process and we have to repeat it a bunch of times is because buildings just get built of steel and concrete unless you make the intentional decision to make it.
But I know it would be helpful for me, but maybe for the project, when you say build out of wood, it's like it means these other things, just because it's not intuitive to me what that would mean. It sounds like, I mean, I like wood sculpture, I just was working. So it's like, I don't, yeah, there's just not enough qualities to know like why we would choose one out.
No, I understand that. So from the experience of a building occupant, there would be, you wouldn't notice the difference. I mean, you'd see the wood, it'd be beautiful. That'd be wonderful. There's things like difference in grid spacing, like from a structural standpoint, when you're designing the building. The classrooms should be a certain dimension. The structural span should be a certain dimension. If you just go and design whatever you want without thinking about that, then the building will default to steel and concrete because they're just inherently more flexible. While wood is kind of an equally efficient from a structural standpoint, material, but only in a more, I don't know, specific configuration, I would say.
When you say configuration, are you referring to like a floor plan? Like,
Yeah,
so then the unintended impact or consequence, and I think that's what you're trying to get at to some degree, is that if you choose that, then some of the decisions that we make more, that we pursue more generally, could be impacted by that.
yes, it would be
So
impacted.
like if we wanted a really open space, it might be impacted by, I don't know, like,
Yeah,
I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Scott might have an answer to this. It wouldn't be negatively impacted. It's not like if you go with wood, you can't have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we wouldn't design the building to forfeit any of the other
Right.
its attributes or any of the desires on what we're shooting for by building that wood. It would be a yes and. That would, we work closely with you to make sure everything we're designing works with the system, but also is meeting all of the other objectives of the community, the program, spatial experience.
We're at time. So I'm happy to take your question after the fact, or next week at this time in this room at our sustainability visioning shred, where we'll talk about wood structure, we'll talk about energy efficiency, and we'll talk about a lot of other topics and like dig into the strategies that this project can employ to create great experiences for the students, to positively impact the community and the ecology, and to really live up to the kind of the strong climate leadership that was set forth by the Board of Education.
If you can't make that meeting and you have a pressing question, please submit it through PBS team, right? Everybody has your emails. And then we'll make sure. Sorry.
All right. I think that Jeannie, are you up?
No, I think it's Kareem.
Oh, Kareem is up. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kareem. I think I've met most of you, but maybe not all of you. I'm with Co-Locate Design, part of the community engagement team that's working on this project. And talk a little about this, but you don't have to read the tiny print. It's not critical. It's mostly meeting schedule stuff. And a lot of these meetings are meetings that you're in on. But what I am going to do quickly is introduce something that I didn't talk about at the last version of this session, which is the way that Co-Locate approaches community engagement, which is different than how a lot of community engagement consultants might, because we're not a traditional community engagement consultant practice. We are a organizing, advocacy, and architecture design practice, and we're a nonprofit. And when it comes to community engagement, our approach is community organizing structures. So this meeting, I asked folks to stand up and by role, and one of the groups of roles that Becca named was community design organizers, which I've got Michael, Leo, and Kay, I think, is in the room somewhere, or was in the room. We've got a team of 7 folks who we have hired onto.
Is anyone online?
Say again.
Is anyone online?
Dominique might be watching online. If you are, hi, Dominique. But we've got a team of 7 folks, and you will see. Oh, there you are. You'll see them in these committee meetings. Not everyone will be able to make it to all of them, but they'll be here as they're able to, both to observe, understand what the conversations are that are taking place in this space, which is a really important decision-making space for this project, and then be able to share that back out with folks in their communities and their relationship networks, and vice versa, be able to, with the relationships that they carry, with the lived experience that they bring of being part of the JEF community or being in relation to the JEF community, be able to bring in the voices of folks who aren't at this, can't attend this, can't make it to the town halls, who can't make it to any of the wonderful events that you know. So they'll be organizing their own engagement activities and share opportunities for folks from this group to be present for those as is appropriate. But it's also not necessarily getting as many people as possible into the same event every time. It's about understanding where relationships lie and what different stakeholders in this project and the outcome of this project project to make sure that they're influencing and informing the outcomes of the project. Because at the end of the day, the folks who community design organizers are similar to some of the folks in your own relationship networks will be living in this building day in and day out for years. It will have their lives and on the lives of their families, their friends, their community members at large. So community design organizers are it's a program essentially that co-locates through all of our projects, and we pay folks to join our team and be part of that engagement process. So I know that we didn't necessarily introduce that early on, but wanted to make that clear so that folks understand. If you got a community design organizer table, folks out and about, that's what they're doing. They're part of the team. And having said that, I'm going to do a quick run through of some of the engagement work that Co-Locate has been leading, and then I'll also invite any of the CDOs who are in the room to share if you have anything that you want to share. Some of what you may have been hearing, or any activities that you're, actions that you're planning, or events that you're planning that you want to bring. So Co-Locate held a number of engagement sessions with youth ages 6th grade through high school over the course of the summer. We were at Fabian with 6th through 8th graders. We were also visited a couple of different high schools, Roosevelt High School, Daniel High School, thank you, and spoke with student athletes, spoke with folks who went to Jeff or have relationships in the Jeff community to understand from their perspectives what are things that they're excited about, what are things that they're worried about when it comes to envisioning their high school experience, and also what kinds of activities or what kinds of programs or classes would they want to be able to see in their high school experience. For high schoolers, they were able to reflect on their own experience of being a student in high school, so they gave us some direct feedback or suggestion. Middle schoolers, it's a little bit more nebulous, but a lot of questions about how to essentially hold relationships and be in relationship with one another, spend time with friends, navigate around a school with the bigger kids. So I won't try to list everything that we've heard so far, but what we do is take copious notes, and some of our engagement tools or exercises like the ones you see here actually give folks the ability to describe a vision, write their questions or concerns or the visions that they have, and assemble them into structures that take up space, that invite other people to engage with that and participate and respond to or add questions of their own. So we were at the SEI Homecoming Festival and used that set of actions there as well. And between Co-Locate and the community design organizers that we are working with so far, and this is not, this actually update this from the last time we did this session, but this is just a quick list of some of the stakeholders that CDOs and Co-Locate are talking to already or working on talking to. Not included in here, Latino Network, as well as actually Feeder Schools is on here. So one of our CDOs is actually working on organizing some events with students and families from feeder schools, as well as the Black Parent Initiative. So organizations that are either in Jeff or in the neighborhood or in the community, because we understand the community extends beyond the geographic boundaries of this neighborhood. And I'm going to give a little run through of some of the themes that have been emerging from what we've heard so far, and in our dialogue and through dialogue with the CEOs. But okay. Well, in that 5 minutes, I will describe this for the record and the folks who are watching at home and maybe can't see the screen. These themes will continue to evolve. The more conversations we have, the more they'll build up, and maybe new themes will emerge. But essentially, things that have come up as important so far are creating welcoming and accessible spaces for students in their communities. And that is not limited to folks who are students in the building or their families. It's the community that supports those students. And Jeff is a cultural hub, and it should continue to operate as such. Honoring cultural histories and acknowledging the injustices embodied in this building, in this district, in this place, this city, as well as the work that has been done by the community to challenge and build more just circumstances. Investing in Cte and Stem has come up a lot, especially from conversations with students, recent graduates, as well as students. STEM and learning, STEM learning environments, life skill applications, things like sports management, for example, that might not traditionally be thought of as a Cte or a STEM program, but that tie very closely to some of the things about jobs culture that are important. Investing in arts education beyond dance programs, including band, theater, ceramics, visual arts, podcasting, multimedia, recognizing that there's a TV studio in this building that used to be a resource to the district as a whole, and now largely sits vacant. Creating a range of types of gathering spaces for students, family, staff, and community to meet different needs, needs for connection, needs for reflection. Developing academic programs that have culturally relevant pedagogy, and in tandem with that, hiring more BIPOC teachers to reflect the experiences and cultures of the communities, because culturally relevant pedagogy and familiarity with that culture from lived experience are synergistic with one another. Investing in health, safety, and quality of experience for JEP occupants during the design process has also come up consistently. How are we making the space livable, safe, healthy, and functional for the students who are going to be here throughout the process of design into the new building? And then some issues that have come up as areas of concern, lack of general awareness about the project timeline and goals, and concern about the pace of the project timeline. It is moving fast. It's hard to have iterative feedback loops with folks in the community in time to influence design decisions. And there has been some advocacy for providing some more grace on the timeline. Not enough information about possible outcomes for people to be able to give informed opinions. So the more information folks have, the more they're able to respond. Fears around losing access to the cultural hub with ongoing displacement and gentrification is a huge area of concern. And then questions around the impacts of this project on current and future student enrollment. What happens to all those students who are in this building, or families who see JEP as it is now or as it may be during construction and don't feel like they want their kids to go here when they have other options. Although the future of this building will support and address many of the issues that currently exist. So those are some of the big themes that have been emerging.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, I just put the yellow in to indicate like primary areas of concern with the process rather than this specific design. I will present. So
I think you wanted to see.
I would love that if any of the CEOs, if any of you all want to share anything that you're working on or anything that feels particularly relevant for this group here. This isn't the last opportunity to try to squeeze it into 15 minutes, but
3 minutes? You can do those. Total.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Just this morning, feels like the most intuitive 3-minute version to say this was across the street at Cason's, and Cason, I learned used to do barbecues for the Rooster Club, and as it would happen, former principal Opal walked into the meat counter, and then we got to talking, and so is a sample size of particularly elders in the community who have very decade-long standing, both in Cason's memory as like a student rep, so both the members that I'm really involved with, and that I'm a part of this project, and asked me about it, and so I was able to update him between this meeting and the last. And so is a sample size of kind of like particular relationships in which I'm serving. But the reason I went was because Kason and I are planning a barbecue to particularly engage. He wants to hit 150 to 250 elders in the community. And so we'll be a crucible for starting to get an imprint about, because the last meeting we're like, oh, new building, old building. And there was like not a lot of nuance around what that really meant to hold the old building, like not like whether building or not, but just what is the spirit of that. So it's just an example of something that I'm convening and folks are invited to witness. Check.
That sounds amazing.
You're invited.
Thank you.
Late September, early October. Same thing.
Yeah, y'all are collaborating on that.
Theo is a very close confidant on this.
Tay, do you want to share anything? I know Tay's been having conversations with teachers and fellow recent grads, and we'll be talking more with current students as well. And then, yeah, Dominique is working a lot with parents and kids, and is interested in setting up a pop-up youth art event later the next month or so. And others are drawing on their own relationships, both here, connections at PCC, connections at other programs that have partnerships with Jeff. Things are moving. And again, the more that we hear, the more we understand what meanings and narratives are important to folks in the community, both, not both, around design of the space, but also around programs that go in the space and around the policies that govern access to space and who gets to make decisions around how space is used. All those things go together, so we don't try to separate them out. And we're all designed, so-
Great.
Well, this is great because it's kind of the first time that we get to hear sort of things that are coming out from the community who are not in this room, who are not part of the CPC. So I look forward to hearing more about that. What we're going to do next is an a sort of talking activity together, and we're going to talk about the things that drive design. So all of the things like the site and money and time and all of that. And what I'd like to do is kind of go through and explain it, and then let you have 5 minutes to yourself to write on a Post-it sort of how you rank these things. And then you can be in groups and kind of talk through it a little bit. And we did this last time, and we're putting these at the front of the meeting because last time we did them later in meeting, and they take some time and some conversation. And so we wanted to give it a little bit more space. So thinking about the things that drive design, specifically this project has a really large site. It has existing buildings on it. It's close to PCC, it's close to the library. There are lots of things about it that will really define how we design and what things are important to keep where they are or to move around, right? So I'm going to go through kind of how some of these things impact it. So one is obviously cost. That's a big design driver, right? If we were to modernize this existing building, that's actually much more expensive than building new. That doesn't mean that's what we're going to do. It's just one of the things that we need to consider, right? So that's something that impacts how we design. Thinking about temporary facilities, for instance, if we took everything down, we would have to have a temporary facility where kids would go to school, teachers would go work there, and that really impacts people. And having those temporary facilities means that we're putting money into that we're then not putting into the new buildings, right? The amount of site work that's going to happen is also something that impacts how we design. It is a really big site. And so kind of dealing with where things go on the site, that also has a cost impact. Time is the next one. And thinking about this project, if it were in a single phase and we were, taking everything down and building up again, that would take less time than keeping buildings we have, renovating them, and then adding additions onto it to actually increase the capacity and the efficiency, right? So having a single phase is definitely less expensive than multiple phases, but this is a really big project and there's a lot of buildings on the site, so it's very unlikely that we could do this all in one phase, right? So just kind of think about how that impacts your what we're going to talk about later. We talked about new construction modernization of the existing building. New construction would take less time than modernizing an existing building, because what we do is we go through and we kind of take the skin off of lots of places and do some testing. This would really be for seismic upgrades to this building. So it'd be adding more structure in lots of places. So you can imagine that process would take longer than building something from the ground up. And swinging offsite might simplify construction if everyone was sort of out of the way and reduce the time that it takes. But again, not necessarily what we're going to do. So looking at this, you can see that all of these buildings were built at a different time, and they're all in the middle of the site with the track on one side and fields on the other side. Really looking at this, the sort of architecturally significant buildings are really these two. You know, the one we're in now is the 1909, and then the gym is the 1928. And what we do have in Portland is historic resource review. So as part of design review, there is a landmarks commission that seeks to protect historic landmarks, right? And make sure that any renovations we're going to do on them are respectful of the original architecture, right? So that's a process that we would be going through if we save or modernize any of these buildings, right? They would look at them and say, and we would present an entire design to them. And at that point, they would tell us, you know, these things are working, these things aren't working. It's really just an FYI that's part of the process. If we decided to save all the buildings, or if we just saved one or part of one, that would still be part of the process that we would let you in on. So thinking about that, there's things about the building itself that have changed over time. So that's one of the things that Historic Landmarks Commission would look at, is the significance of the building and how intact those original architectural details are. So if you look at some of the old photos, which we may have had back in there, there was a lot of detail happening in all of these spaces, right? There were a lot of, there were some, I don't know, diamond shapes and lots of ornamentation, and that stuff has been skimmed over since, right? So those are kind of gone. The original roof forms are gone. They were sort of this four-sided pitch roof, and now it's flat on the top. So there are a lot of things that have changed over time during remodels, renovations of these buildings. And these are just to kind of think about the big spaces and the buildings on site that we're looking at right now. And there's a lot of great stuff in here, right? So thinking about the existing buildings that could potentially be modernized, there are hazardous materials that folks used to build with that we would have to remediate, take those out. Accessibility upgrades, you'll see that there's stairs in lots of places, and it means that people with different levels of mobility aren't able to easily get in and out of the building. So we'd be rebuilding stairs and ramps and things like that. Fixing up the exterior, that's a big deal, trying to bring some of that detail that was there before again. Thinking about the envelope, old buildings aren't necessarily energy efficient, so we'd be upgrading that. Replacing windows and things like that so that you would have a more energy efficient building. And then the structural upgrades that I was talking about. So inserting more structure to make the building resilient in any kind of a seismic event. So the other two that are really big ones as drivers of the design are culture and heritage and disruptions. And so culture and heritage, we think about, here's this place that holds a lot of memories and it's important to people in the community, and that everyone has kind of a history here. It's a place where communities gather. And so thinking about the impact of this culture and heritage and history and memory on the project is also really important. That drives the design. Thinking about the community members who are here and what their experiences have been, what we want to highlight, that's going to go into the design, right? So thinking about, you know, what parts of this campus hold specific memories? What are the things that we're trying to carry from its current state into the new Jefferson? And thinking about how this project can really bridge past and future and sort of represent history and culture in a way that is joyful and lets folks know when they come in that this is still part of the community and still holds kind of all of those things that are important. Thinking about disruptions, that's another thing that we're going to consider when we design, right? So if you think about how we're going to keep students at Jefferson while it's under construction, right? If you're in a remote site, does that mean students are going to leave? That disruption is going to be something that we take into account when we're designing, and when you're looking at these various scenarios of keeping buildings, losing buildings, building all new. What's going to bring those students back? Thinking about what happens in the interim. Athletics wouldn't be able to use the fields while things are in construction, right? The arts and the studios wouldn't be in use during that time, so folks would have to go off-site to do any of that. That's a big deal to think about, that disruption to the community and to what happens at Jeff every day. Thinking about academics, you know, if folks were staying in one building while we're building another, there's noise, there's different circulation patterns because you can't go one way because there's construction in that area. We have to keep everyone out. And so it's a different way of using the entire campus that we'd be thinking about. So these are all really sort of big ideas of things that are really going to drive the design and what decisions are going to be made. So what I'd love for us to be able to do now is to prioritize them for yourself, just for 5 minutes, and think about what's the most important thing to you in terms of driving the design. Are you concerned about holding the culture and heritage and making sure that everything we design relates back to that? Are you concerned about making sure that we're not disrupting any of the current community activities, sports, sort of the camaraderie that happens at this campus now? Are you concerned about how long it's going to take for us to finish this project and then bring students back and who we're going to lose during that time? Are you concerned about cost and how much we're spending on, say, modernizing this existing building with new structure and new skin and new windows versus how much money we would spend to build it, right? So these are just kind of think about those for 5 minutes on your own, maybe rank them, and then I'll let you know when 5 minutes is up, or maybe when 5 minutes is up, and then you can get in groups and kind of talk through that and see if there's any commonalities. Yes, you have a question.
I have a question about design for
Okay.
longevity. Is there any obligation to build a building that lasts longer than it costs to pay off the bond?
I don't know how long it takes to pay off the bond. Maybe that's Steve, that's something you could comment on. We build buildings to be
they're
100 years. This is what we're going.
So that wouldn't matter with the
100-year building.
Expectation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Resilience. Yeah.
I will say that there are design tools that will result in a building that lasts longer or a building that so definitely something to be considered.
Yeah, and that's something we talk about more in the future meetings. I'm gonna hit start on a 5-minute time.
All right. Okay. 5 minutes. Think to yourself. If you need some Post-its, bring these around. Does everyone have some? And you can make different versions.
Think first. Think for sure. Yeah. Think.
Okay. And one is the most important. So number everything that you want to focus on.
I don't know where it went.
Are you a member of the committee?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So 2 members of the committee at this table.
Yeah, this.
That was, I was so confused.
Are you a member of the committee? You're not.
Right.
Yeah.
This one is.
Your choice.
Yeah.
It's COD. Yeah. So you're a member of that committee.
It's still public.
And I get to come back over here tomorrow.
For your first class.
Nope.
Or what?
My second day of. I have Future Connect orientation tomorrow. Tuesday, Thursday next. And then
Stuff.
the week after that.
Like what?
Super excited.
Baseball field?
Business 101 and ASL.
It's smaller.
That's, are we sending in?
A lot.
Have we done that?
It's gonna be a lot of homework.
ASL 101 because I'm trying to take ASL
I
102.
think it's sent out, but let me ask Steve, because he's the one who sent them out. Okay.
Those are the two classes you're signing up for?
No, no.
Huh? Or you're just taking two?
Technically, I'm taking 4. So there's ASL 101, VA 101, CG 130, and then Health
Oh, good.
112.
How's it taking that CG class? What's CG? Good. Which one? Career?
College.
College, yeah.
Well, there's 2 of them. There's CG 101, which I'm in now, which I had my first class
Like
yesterday.
study skills. And
Yeah. And then CG 130, which starts.
there's a series in there, like, depends. I think some of them are like career evolution.
Yeah.
Good though, good. I just want to make sure you're gonna keep all your credits going. Take a full load of credits.
I'll be okay.
Yes, you will get it. Okay.
Hi. I'm Josh.
Oh, the timer hasn't gone off.
It's just hard for me to, I don't know, I just feel like I'm not quite qualified to understand how to prioritize those decisions, but me, I'm like, I want a safe place for students.
Yeah, we'll go and.
That they see themselves, like, feel comfortable in.
And in a second.
I can set about the time.
Yeah. So maybe, yeah.
Be in this building that continues to fall apart.
It's only been 4 minutes, but let's go ahead and transition to the next spot, because the next spot is doing what you're already doing, which is talking to one another, and then making a new list based on sort of the consensus of the group. So what we'd love to do is set up 3 tables, because there are 9 CPC members. So 3 CPC members at each table, and then a CDO at each table, because we have also 3 CDOs.
You're a CDO at this table.
So can we ask that?
That is great.
Did you guys check it out?
It was.
Also,
Does anybody have this?
right here. You were at the assembly.
Then
today,
we're gonna.
right?
Twice.
Were you at the assembly today?
I don't know why. I was in the
I was at home
freshman
cleaning my room.
sophomore
I
one.
heard about
Yeah,
it.
I don't know what happened.
How long?
I was just there, and I was
Was
like,
there, did you feel a difference?
We have another hall.
yeah, there was like a big difference because they were like,
I'm so glad you went to both.
yeah, they were. I was like, I don't think
like a
upperclassmen
10-minute
here.
10-minute discussion, okay?
It felt really embarrassing. I was just like,
But it wasn't. But you have a unique
It wasn't.
perspective.
Our first
yeah,
thing
I
was
do.
racial
Because
equity.
they were like more. Hey, you guys are basically adults. We know what's going on, and we're trying to fix it.
With
for you.
11th and 12th graders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the freshman one was like, "Oh, you're just entering the building. We're gonna be nice to you. We don't want to like turn you off to the school." So it was a big difference. It was just weird.
Would you like to join us?
Yeah. Listen.
Should be a way to get.
So did you each get a chance to like decide what's number 1 for you?
No, I'll
Because
grab
what
the other
we'd like is for you all then to decide together on a ranking for these things that are important, something that you can all agree.
Me,
And we're just gonna sit here and listen and take some notes. So we're not trying to.
all.
That was
I know that's super creepy. We just want to hear a conversation. That's all.
I put disruptions as my number 1 because I feel like everything is connected to that. Like the culture of their school, how many people are gonna still be here after that, and like I know like a lot of people get like overstimulated really easily, and like a lot of disruptions, and like all the time, all of it is connected to how many disruptions there are. And then I said culture as my number 2, time number 3, and cost as my last.
Love the way you said that, and I definitely agree. Like the disruptions do impact everything.
Who wants to go next?
I'll take a stab at it. I feel like this is really hard for me to do because I don't setting these priorities. I don't feel like I have. Anyways, I understand enough about them and the impacts of them really, like the idea of cost, I'm like, I don't really know. I don't know how much things cost, like in what context. But I think hearing you say that around disruptions really does make me think about like the sort of like my time here, just feeling the disruptions of one, being in a building that is falling apart and literally you can't get to school safely from one floor to another, especially if you have to use the elevator. And just like it's hard to be here. And so like, and then hearing what you said earlier about time, just like the more we take our time in the process, like making sure that everything is perfect, the longer the students who are here now are suffering because of that. Because it doesn't feel good to be here.
Yeah.
People feel it, they talk about it, they recognize, and it's been this history that's impacted culture and heritage because it's been neglected, forgotten about. People are still doing amazing things here, but it's like, what more can we be doing? And if we're like sacrificing yet again another group of people in the name of something greater, it just feels like it's a continuation of a legacy of sacrifice for something in the future, and that disruption of culture and heritage too. When you have the new building, then how enticing that is it for people who didn't have their eyes and didn't want to come during the disruption. I don't know, there's a lot of feelings I have. Yeah. I don't know. I felt like I just complained and didn't prioritize. It's good.
I think that the time that it takes is going to be completely dependent on how you want it to work, and if you want it to be safe, and if you want it to be fully ADA compliant. That's going to take time. Time is something that it's going to take an enormous amount of time anyway. The cost is completely dependent on what you decide to use. So I feel like those two things are not necessarily a thing to prioritize at the moment, because those two things are going to take however long it takes. It's going to cost however much it costs. But I think that the culture and heritage and disruptions are the most important things that are going to affect students. Because if you're taking a school that has an immense culture that is incredibly connected to the community around it, and if we can't use the fields, if we can't use the track, then people who usually come to football games, soccer games, track meets have to go elsewhere. And that's a commute. A lot of people probably aren't going to want to do that. So that would lead into disruption because it's not using the space that everybody knows that a lot of people saw get redone. Because you can't use it because there's construction all over the place. So I think that it would be, I would say, community, culture and heritage, then disruptions, and then time and costs are interchangeable for us too.
I appreciate everything else said. The first thing that I think about is how, like, if we need time to honor the culture and heritage and limit disruptions, and if we're going to take time, like, there have to be commitments to serving the students in the building currently. Because I think that's like feeling that I hear, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is that like there's a feeling that's being built for someone else, for some other, to draw in other kinds of students and families, and that is perpetuated when you have things like an elevator that doesn't consistently work, which is in violation of and like just basic facilities, and we don't have, like, there are like events that happen in the district, and they're holding those at the new school because they know they're going to be able to plug in their projector, and they're going to have a screen, and they're not going to have to run around jury-rig things. And so our students and families are missing out on opportunities. They're taking them out to the, you know, to Franklin or to McDaniel or other places because we don't have an adequate facility to hold a meeting, you know, and so that's my, like, I don't think time is the most important, but it does, like, just, yeah, sorry, I'll stop talking. Yeah.
Totally. I was just gonna say, that's, if, I like that, if we are gonna take time, yeah, don't prioritize it, but put it somewhere safe, or like, give us a safe condition.
And show show the students that they are worth a safe building, even if it's not new. Like, I think I visited a friend who works in an old building in Astoria, and it's very old, but it's like clearly been maintained, and you can see the like lack of care. Yeah, and I had somebody come in my room today and like ask for missing wall tiles. I pointed some out. I was like, "Are you looking for all the broken things? Because I've got a lot of broken things." And he just like took some pictures and left. And that's what. And I don't know if that's still there, but I was talking to the librarian. There's been like a hole there for a couple of years, and she said people come and take pictures and they leave. And I'm like, that's a message our kids are getting every day.
Yeah, that people have recognized there's something wrong, but they're not doing anything about it, right?
And building, you know, have you seen Lincoln? Have you seen the skyscraper? Whatever.
Right. It's enormous. Yeah. It's a really big. So thinking about, you know, preserving culture and heritage and minimizing disruptions, that's where then the question comes up, you know, does minimizing disruptions mean that, well, there's two kinds, right? There's, imagine you're modernizing this school, means no one can be in it. So that's a big disruption. Everyone has to move away, right? If you were building something new, people could stay in this building while something new was being built and then move over there, which is what they did at Lincoln. They kept everyone in the old building, built on a different part of the site. So say we build towards Killingsworth or something, right? New building there. Everyone stays here and then can go over there. I think those are the kind of things that we want people to start thinking about, right? Because it's all disruptive, right? Yeah. And we're always going to think about culture and heritage when we're designing, but the disruption really is to the traditions and things that people that they're not going to be able to do if everyone else.
Has there been a thought to move some things over to PCC and potentially utilize parts of that campus? They're like less than 50% in person.
Right. I think that's a great idea, and it's something we should definitely talk about as an option. If that is an option, then that's a way to keep people close by because
with air conditioning.
Right, air conditioning and heat and I mean that's the thing, right? Is like lots of these programs won't work if they're not here, right? Yeah. The middle college, like that doesn't work if it's right next to BCC. You know, having an SEI office and programs here. If it's not here, then just go to the SEI building, right? It's not going to be in Jefferson. Then it will come back after construction. But this isn't like this is an easy choice for you to make, and we're not asking you to like decide what's going to happen. It's really to kind of talk about what are all the things that are going to impact these decisions and bringing up new ideas about what we could do. Great. It's really helpful.
Sounds like we're turning back to.
So before we go back, do you want to create your consensus list? What's number one? It definitely wasn't cost or time. So is it culture or is it disruption?
I think it was disruption.
Well, I really loved the way, I should have written it down, the way you said it about how like they're linked.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, we're at time. And what we're going to do next is just ask each table to share back.
Yeah.
And tell us what your list is, what your priority is. So maybe let's start back with this group right here.
Also,
want to share what your list of priorities.
The like 5 minutes, not gonna.
Yes, please, Kareem. What's your question?
Oh, that was like,
you see that?
Oh yeah.
So like, let's build a New building, change the name.
A ranking of priorities.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, those
Was. Yes.
what they talked about.
Yes. It absolutely is. Yeah.
It's
just an
very
exercise.
limited time.
Yes. We really have about 3 more minutes and then we're going to go on to another intern. So yeah, share with me whether it's consensus or not.
20 seconds.
Right.
Priority, doing the list.
Yeah.
We were not into that. At all. I think if we had to choose for the exercise, instead of doing like a 1, 2, 3, and adding pictures, we all maybe it's like concentric circles or
Yeah.
First and foremost is cultural heritage.
Yeah.
We talked about future building. We talked a lot about existing partnerships, location and site here specifically. We see the library. You mentioned a lot of partnerships.
Yeah, it's
In
part
place.
Yeah.
In place. Okay. Then second is disruption. I think we melded disruption and time together. And I think probably the big distinction of temporary disruption versus permanent disruption. And then cost as the outer rate. Is that anyone else want to add anything? You talked a lot about policy. No, that's kind of it's all about time.
It went with disruption.
Oh, it was disruption.
That was cute.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I think also the comment about making sure that sustainability doesn't trigger a ton of added costs, but it's actually something that's managed.
I think
Great.
the last thing too was if it could be shared, what is included in a comprehensive school in terms of programming, because we talked about like how you mentioned therapeutic rooms and specific.
Yeah, school-based health center, what is in the package that's supposed to be there?
Yeah. And yes, and a ton of stuff, but yeah, we don't have it.
Thank you. Okay, this group over here. What did you come to? Consensus or no?
Yes, we have.
I think that Gloria, we're having design team members report for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
is that okay?
I can go for it, yeah.
I think.
So culture and heritage was the primary driver.
Right.
This group, correct me if I'm wrong, felt that a big piece of culture and heritage was maintaining the existing building. And then not sacrificing the place or changing it too much. Time and, sorry, number 2 was disruption, followed by time, and then followed by money. And there was a thought that if we can't get everything we want, we can go back for more money later, bonds, grants or whatever. Did that cover it? Anything else to contribute?
Well, I think when we talked about the money piece too, right? Because that was the first thing I brought up. Like, if how much does this bond going to cover, right? Does it cover everything? And where are the sacrifices being made if we were to put portables across the street? Because that was like $20-$30 million. Like, what sacrifices are being made if money is being spent doing that? And so we talked about like what it maybe it's interior stuff, lighting, or microscopes, or all these things that we could maybe ask for in a grant later on if for some reason. But we want the big building, to exist, right? I think the other stuff, if we needed the money, would be
I think we recognize that this isn't, we're not just choosing now and then deciding, okay, that's it. That's how we're going to build this building, right? And there's also, there's no way that we can all come to the same answer. And so really this is about having you all think about it and give us these sort of answers that are like, well, this is the missing information that we need in order to sort of make those decisions. We totally recognize this does not include all the things that you would actually need if we were supposed to decide, but it's about this conversation, so we make sure that we're kind of hearing everything that comes up at the table. So thank you. All right, and this group here.
So Liz or Chandra, you should probably
Sure.
report on this table. That's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I left at the end, so I don't know if we got to a consensus.
I think maybe we don't.
Yeah, I guess my
takeaway was that disruption was like a pretty high priority. And I'll let someone else kind of get into detail on that, but
Yeah. So where did we end up? I know that culture and heritage were high.
Moncala said this better than I will, but that the culture and heritage and disruptions are linked. That if we're disrupting the culture and heritage of the building, then we're endangering it, like existing here, the long term. That pretty good.
Did you have any thoughts about money and time?
Yes. Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Well, one of them is that like students are currently right now kind of in a hazardous situation. So there've been like, and I won't go into all the details, but it is not safe to be in this building, both physically and emotionally. And the longer that takes, the more fuel to the fire that students already feel like they are not cared about. And who are you building this building really for? Continues to like exacerbate the issue. And so, so if it's going to take time, really thinking about that piece about the disruptions in cultural heritage is really important because we need to be in a safe place while construction is happening, not continuing to push it down the road because there's going to be a nice building someday. Is like, it's a big deal.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see.
Yeah, a few minutes over.
Just a few minutes over.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Jeannie.
We're gonna take
Oh, we're gonna take a break. Sorry. Yeah.
Stretch
break's
break, a
important.
bathroom break, a water break, food break for 5 minutes. And then we're gonna come back and return to the conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, 6. Get started until like 6.
I told you it's gonna be 3 hours.
I had anxiety.
I told you. I just want to say that.
You're on it. You're on. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Good.
I have my name card and
I forgot
everything.
to say, but I liked what you said about it's gonna cost. It's gonna take as long as it takes.
Because it is. And all, it's going to take as long as it takes.
Yes.
No matter what you do, no matter what you say, the time is going to be there and it'll always be there. The cost will always be there because it's not exactly going to be free to change an entire building.
Right.
So the cost and the time are always going to be there. It's not very flexible.
I do think like who's getting the money also feels important. Like who's being paid to do the work.
Yeah.
Feels really important.
And there definitely is an equity plan for construction and minority and businesses and just the number of minorities and women who are actually working on the job, so those hours that are spent. And we'll get down to that once we sort of talk about how we're going to do it, right? There's a lot to talk about.
So kind of like need to make it happen in
Well, just to me, I love hearing the conversation because I've been hearing about culture and disturbance, right? I think what's going to make it interesting personally is understanding what does culture mean to each person, right? Because the short answer would be like the least disturbance would be to build something and remove this, but so where is the culture? Is the culture in the brick and in the facade, or is the culture in the people and in the spirit of the place, right? And how and which pieces need to be maintained for that culture to remain in place and which pieces are not necessary. I was sharing with Jenny, I was part of you may know this project, Hayward Field, down at the University of Oregon, right? Like the most iconic, sacred, like track and field place in the world, right?
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, it was a big conversation, should it be demolished and a new track built, right? And it was a conversation and it was demolished and a new track was built and it's proven to be very, very successful. And I think for me as part of the design team, the reason it was because we try to get at the core of what is that made the place special, not necessarily what part, because it's made of wood or, like what is it that made people feel that beautiful feeling when they were in those places? What is it that made them feel like a special event, right? Beyond the architecture of the place, right? In a sense, so.
There are some things that we heard about before, like in the conceptual planning, that like if they demolish, then they have to build to the current like standard classroom size, and we have taller ceilings than in other buildings, and
I don't know that anyone.
and bigger classrooms. And so part of maintaining pieces of the structure is to also maintain that kind of environment that is, it feels nicer to be in a big open classroom. Sure. Especially when you're packing 35 kids in it,
So perhaps those are the pieces that become really important if it was to be in the architecture that was transmitted to the design team.
Particularly like the theater too. So like the code for theaters are much smaller than the code than like Jefferson's theater. And so the idea is that we actually at the redesign they were like, no, we actually want a bigger theater than what we have now because there isn't the space for like the productions to take place the way that they would like them to take place. And so
because the standard is like 500 seats, is that right? I think
that's right.
Like being able to bring people into that theater is really
And we will go through sort of looking at what's in how big they are. And, for instance, there's like, I'm supposed to have a baseball. So you don't have room for the softball, you can't. I don't understand why softball is for women and baseball is for men, but that's one of those things. Like, if you don't have room on the site, then you don't get, I can't accommodate. But I know that there are some things that will be different for MJ. And one of them is that's going to be bigger than standard PPS because of the special programming that we have here. So there are things that they have to take into consideration. That school is not the same as all the other schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll get into all that stuff because that's not what I know a lot about. Like what's in the comprehensive school. So we'll go. But what, we didn't ever introduce you. We had a lot of people raise their hands. Yes, you're a design team, but this is our landscape architect.
I'm in landscape architect and with place, so I'm so excited to hear all these conversations.
Yeah,
Understand all
this
this.
time he's gotten to join us here. When we're starting to talk about the site, there's lots of things to talk about there. So.
A lot of opportunities.
And then next, we're going to look at some scenarios, keep buildings, don't keep buildings, do these things. And again, it's not like we're deciding today and going forward with that thing. It's really about general conversations. What do you care about? Get a snack.
Your doodling is much nicer than mine, but I have to do something all the time. Yeah, my paper over there is full of little dots.
I like to do that.
I think it's the second.
They want their cantaloupe.
Yeah.
I am really interested what people are thinking about whose idea was it to change the name. Thinking about it.
That has been a conversation.
Sure.
This is like separate.
This is
They want to do it. They want to do it at the same time. They brought it up at the meeting. It was
What I'm saying is this is separate from community initiative.
They want to keep the name until the new building, and then once the new building is built,
Invisible thing that is actually
then change.
I happened to witness because I was in the right place.
Very interesting.
She was just like, I don't even sure. Then I was like, mini screen. She's like,
Well, and
Because it's
also,
our
she's like,
Jefferson
now
project.
I
It's not
that. I don't want to do that. But then she had all these
new name and process projects.
I feel like that would be very long to put
Exactly.
on the front of the school.
But they've been having the conversation for a really long time. I remember freshman year, I was in a Zoom meeting about the conversation change, and I'm like,
I mean, we've been asked.
conversations have been going on for so long. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if freshman year they were talking about the new building, so they're like, oh, we'll just wait until then.
Well, the last time there was a community initiative to change the name, Jefferson students went over there and said,
It's funny when she was asking me the question.
and they stopped.
I didn't give her the answer.
From my understanding,
And I was like,
idea of changing the name was shot down by the alumni.
It was alumni it was like, they're not all uniform people, like from Monolith, right? So it was like some of them proposed it and
that is
that shirts.
many without the knowledge of the generation.
Some of them.
And that is inherently
I remember we talked about it in Mr. Commodore's class, sophomore year. We talked about the statue. We talked about changing the name because at that point the statue hadn't come down.
Regardless of the other layers.
We were talking about how we felt about the statue, how we felt about the name.
What did that class say?
A lot of us came to the consensus that it was kind of because we all walk past the statue every day, and Thomas Jefferson was indeed a slaver, and now he's named after the most predominantly African American school in the entire district. So a lot of us are just like it's a ha-ha moment. It's kind of a like ha. As we walk past the statue, and I mean, so much has happened to that statue.
I know.
There was a do-rag put on it.
Constantly, because no one respected him at all, and now our school is like named after it, and it's like, huh? They never respected that statue. I don't remember a single time that statue was not vandalized.
I do.
My perspective.
Freshman year for about 2 months, nothing was done to the statue. And then somebody put a do-rag on it.
Like, I remember when like they had the red eyes and the sides were vandalized. It was like liar, slave owner, and it was just constantly there. Like they kept just spray painting on there. I felt go back to the custodian. They were like scrubbing it off.
But the connection, just being the connection point, it's like
Interesting.
I felt so bad for the custodian for our
senior
classes,
prank?
senior prank.
That was awful.
Because it
There
was
was
literally a whole
everywhere.
bunch of cups and sticky notes.
That was such a boring senior prank. Like
It was the most boring thing in the world, but it was just a whole bunch of sticky notes and paper cups. And I was just like, why?
Where were the sticky notes?
How the front steps. Yeah, it was just all over.
It was really boring.
It was the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, folks, it's time to come back to.
Hi, Steve.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Are you in tech?
I
Anybody do that?
orientation yesterday. My actual classes start at the end of the month. Super excited. Kulak talked about wanting to take ASL with me, and I was just like, you couldn't do that. He was like, why not? I was just like, because my ASL class is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he was like, oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah, we'll be here working.
Thanks for.
Okay.
Settling back in.
Yeah.
You will lie.
Okay, so we are going to continue the conversation just having about the sort of different drivers, but we're going to start thinking about the site a little bit, not just totally abstract and just 4 things and how you might think about them, but start to think about it on this site, because important decision is what we're going to build and where we're going to build it, right? And we're not quite ready to show you exactly what it's all going to look like, but we do know there are only so many options on the site. We know there's fixed areas, right, on this site. So we have a couple of scenarios. So 3 scenarios that I'm going to walk through with you, and we have boards that we want all of you to once again think on your own a little bit between them, what's better, what's not working as well in one or the other, what you're concerned about, and then also get into groups. So we're going to do sort of a similar exercise. So I'm going to walk through the 3 scenarios that we're thinking, and this is very high level. I know that it's really hard to break from like exactly what it all is without the sort of understanding of the program, but consider that the school is the same. It's going to have the same amount of program, same amount of classrooms, it's going to have a gym, it's going to have all of the same things, but where is it on the site? And do we keep the existing building or not? That's kind of where, and I'm also going to walk through the phasing of it, because where we put the new building impacts the rest of where the students go during the construction, because all of these options are showing students staying on the site in one way or another. They're not going to a swing site somewhere else. They're not going to Marshall. This is all the students are staying on the site. So scenario 1 is designing an all new building on the north side of the site. So the existing school kind of sits here, the track is here. So we're basically building towards Killingsworth. And we're going to put a building here, and
all the kids are gonna stay and the teachers are gonna stay in the existing building. Nobody gets disrupted in the beginning, right? We're gonna build over here. Once the school is done, everybody will move over to the new school. The new school is gonna have the gym and theater and classrooms all together in one place. And once that everybody moves over, this will become a new track and field. So we're gonna rebuild the track and field on the south side of the site. So that's scenario one. Any questions before I go on? Okay, we have three of them.
I wonder
so-
how long does that take? Like how long does?
So this one, because we are building new, which Sandra talked about, it's quicker than renovating a building and having to work around all the existing parameters of the building. So we are thinking, when we evaluate them just between the schemes, you'll see 3 sort of clocks, right? In relative terms, it's actually pretty quick because we don't have to move anyone. Everybody stays in place and we build new, and then just one move over, and the track and field obviously going to have to follow. So that is a phasing, and there is disruption to athletics for a period of time. So cost-wise, again, new construction do tend to be less expensive than working around all of the existing building, because in the renovation of this building, we're going to have to tear out a lot of things to redo the structure and then put it all back, right? So there is a sort of take away and then rebuilding it kind of aspect to renovation. Okay, the second idea is that we keep the track where it is. We don't, we're assessing exactly what shape it's in, but let's consider that in really good shape and it can just stay perfectly as where it is. We would actually build a whole new school on the south side. You think this one might be, a possibility. Is what's great about it is that the athletics doesn't get disturbed, right? You can stay, have games on the site during construction the whole time. Construction actually, happens below that line. So you're not disrupting that. In the meantime, construction could be phased in this area, right? Students could potentially stay in the portion of this building for a while. Maybe they even stay in the theater for a while something new is getting built on the very south edge of the site. Students move into classes here, and then we might start to tear down parts of it and build the other parts. So we could tear down the theater by then and, replace with dance studios or something like that. So there's some phasing that will have to go on, but it means that students are going to have to maybe move a couple of times in phases, right? Things will have to kind of happen in phase. So it might take a little bit, it's going to take a little bit more time. And it's probably going to take a little bit more cost because more time is involved and there's a couple of moves happening. So that's kind of how we think about this one. But at the end of it, the track stays where it is and you get a brand new sort of building on the south side. Scenario number 3. This is one where we keep parts of the existing building, and it's sort of talked about. These 2 areas of building right now are the most historically significant, right? The 1909 parts of the building and the old gym that's kind of the TV studio, production studio space now. Those are the 2. So we can keep both and renovate them and structurally upgrade them and turn them into something new, or we can keep one or the other. Like that's, open to sort of interpretation and think about as we think about which ones to keep. But we're going to keep some portion of the existing building. We're going to add to it. So this 1909 building is actually great for classrooms. We can retrofit lots of classrooms in that building. And so maybe we're building a new theater over here. A new, other things that are missing in this building, we're going to put as an addition. This option, again, is great for the fact that the track and field can stay where it is. It doesn't get disrupted during construction. So
what about the gym? Like you say the track and field and then the gym is.
Yeah.
How does that?
So the gym is right here now, right? So if we can keep construction to the south side of the site, that could remain for a really long time. And depending if we're building a new gym, we'll build a new gym on the south side and take the old one down. You know, that's kind of the phasing. So you would never be without a gym on site if we phase it correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that true? So I didn't ask that in the last version, but.
I think there's a
Is it the
possibility for this second version as well. The gym could stay, but the first version is probably very unlikely that the gym can stay.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but it's hard to tell without designing the building yet and knowing how big it is.
In this scenario, athletics would be severely disrupted. All the new schools think that. So there is no field.
Yeah, so during
Right.
the
I was talking about
construction,
scenario two.
yeah, the field where games are, that's gonna have to be accommodated outside. So that is a big disruption to that. That's, so, those are 3 scenarios. You guys are asking some really good questions. We're gonna pass out the boards. I think, again, we would do the same groups that we were in. If it's helpful, we can pull out some easels or pop it up on our chair maybe to help kind of you guys look at it. It's summarized on the board as well as you guys think about it. We're going to give sort of everyone a couple of minutes. I think we said 10 minutes.
Yeah, we've lost a few minutes, so I wonder if we do. I forgot what the timing was. You said
we were going to do 10. Maybe we do 5. Yeah. Yes, please write on Post-it so that we can capture your.
We want to collect your Post-its.
We're gonna collect your Post-its. We only have 3 groups.
There's nowhere to put these. Technically, it's the worst, but I like our building. I think it's.
Do you want me to prop this?
I think we're good.
You're good?
Yeah. And it has like the least disruption, so our sports and our community can still like gather, and hopefully we get a new gathering space for them because they're like on the outside right here all the time for homecoming, and that's not ideal for them. So maybe we'll get like a new area right here, maybe, so they can gather. But I think
So, I mean, if that's the.
So, quiet.
you guys.
Not everybody write for 5 minutes. Write down some of your comments.
So we're asking to do quiet writing.
Conversation.
Yeah, quiet writing.
Yeah, just for a few minutes. Yeah. We're changing that to 5 minutes, so. Rebecca's keeping time, trying. Oh. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, choose. I don't even understand.
Yeah, that's right.
That's really bad. So
How do we?
too much. So we need a slide.
So the next.
I was like, this gives a quick.
It's closed due to.
And we don't need
We don't have to really have
discussion.
discussion.
You know, we can just do 15 minutes. And we have a.
Yes.
This is the one that I made.
It was.
It could be-
We can say.
Yeah, Greg's like, two.
So, pros and cons or priorities.
Well, things are.
Yeah, it should.
Discuss here what we were thinking.
It's only working at two, right?
Yes, we do.
Well, we want to go there.
Absolute. Be off the table, like any reaction.
There about like revenue.
There was
enough
space. Time and money, obviously, less money.
15. Yeah.
Addressing programmatic.
Is there a help?
Not-
Yeah, is there a help funding?
Whatever. It could be its own metrics that can be better.
No, I was just saying that.
But also,
I
I realized that issues that related
whether
to
we make
agricultural trees,
will matter.
where the larger issue is
Special.
systemic.
I just want to know, we've talked about checking our fields for a really long time.
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
just they want it. And so
Yeah.
that is a
They don't
definitely a
know.
concern that exists. Also interesting for other different class meetings. So that this was present. So
Maybe it needs a little, but
there is not equal representation.
so like keeping it.
There is more convenience.
Yeah, I'm kind of like,
Security there.
this one, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Just don't want it to be on site. Like, we gotta but I'm like not really attached.
Because
That's like also to me, I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But like, maybe there's something better, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you want what's best for the students, and that might not be to keep the historic location, and the building is preserved.
Talking about an
There was like some cool ideas when it first came out, like strong desire for people to keep it, I think, you know, and I forgot about it here, so there was such an idea about, we changed the pitch so that like, you created a scene, I think we need to make sure everybody knows because I think we're just here to
That you can also.
give them all this. Like, well, we are. We're trying to.
Yes, you find
We
like
can talk about that. Yeah. It shouldn't.
used to just sit.
I'm just curious, like, new construction,
That's an install that we're talking about.
I don't know if he still does. He did it last year. He did it last year.
like having a conversation to be in DC and to get the support system. So that's going, but I mean, I think you could do it.
Yeah, so why don't we just go with 12 to 2?
Yeah.
But if this is important enough, it's probably.
It's 15 minutes?
Okay.
That sound good?
Yeah.
All right.
I remember very specifically that if we add something new, that must be potential to be more involved and to not feel like, because like no one's on it ever. So she feels like lonely in a sense where she should be like close to the commons area. So I want that to be, because I feel like a lot more people like come into the library if they were like, oh, the library actually has these spaces. Like it's not just like this quiet area.
Well, I had like, I mean, this is like, yeah, I feel like they're like, you know, if you have the library, and it was a also kind of the same space.
That's already. I want to make sure we capture things, so please do.
This was the first time that this also includes.
So like,
One of the things that was really challenging for teachers was
but like, yeah.
no,
yeah.
cancel this. And then it's like,
Experience
oh, well,
/commentary.
Well, I feel like the cafeteria and library are so like out of
this.
like you have to go all the way down there to your engagement. Not a lot of people say that, especially if you're coming from
Phased and on building and phased access and phases of program. So part of what you were saying, the program, is like, okay, we could make everything we
So
want.
like, I think that could happen. I personally think that could happen.
Any of them, yeah.
Yeah, and it might be harder to do with
Say, well, we
things,
can't not have.
but it.
And so are there compromises in what phase that allows us to do that?
So the answer is yes.
Keep the TV production and they like actually make it nice. Like you can't do anything there right now.
You 3 weeks cleaning it. It's been 3 weeks doing it.
Okay, but
We didn't get to the other side.
Yeah, I know.
We had
I was
planned to do the other side, and then
should get in there this year.
you
I'm
did.
nice. I'm gonna I have to. I just have to finish the project. Yeah.
Now we say that every time.
Gotta get my seat.
Renovation and then to go every time you guys move the meeting.
We asked Mr. K to help us.
Is there ever a chance to get to so what we're talking about for something?
Yeah.
I feel like that should
I'm
be
talking about like it's all ceilings.
make sure that students are safe.
The windows are large.
Because I was thinking like if they get this one, and that you're here in the whole building, the construction site, obviously, the wind blows funny. I can feel my concentration shake.
The wind does blow super funny.
Like I don't want like a jackhammer like bringing down the building like next
Oh,
to
it
it.
will. It absolutely will.
Interior.
So
I just watched. Well, you're in class.
That would be the most terrifying thing.
and I haven't. You see, I wonder. Like our ventilation system had not been seen since.
I guess the other thing is like
There was like tickets on there from like years ago where somebody looked at the ticket and they just didn't think so.
Yeah.
Well,
I remember going to a large gym and just sneezing. Fans are running and you can just like feel all the dust entering your nose.
except for the
Talking about how much space
I think they finally cleaned that like system.
you're not losing 12.
and then looking at the
Yeah, are gonna stay true to the correct. I mean, sure, 5 minutes.
and perpetuating.
And the school that
So that's why the get are kind of because they have.
don't need.
So that's what it also means when it says it's now.
But also keeps
There's a major fence which is huge part of it.
especially football.
Something I brought up the last week.
Includes most of them. It's still a huge thing for the community. They all come to support. They come to just hang out.
That is the definition, not sustainable.
Sure. The capacity.
That's the school that has 500 students, 19, 20, so I mean,
That's
that's what the state's
Yeah, so, yeah.
Your awareness about
Is
that's what I heard. We
We
are end up having conversations about stuff, but I don't know. So it's really nice that it's not that this process. It's just no other place.
Like that's
That's
all
where they're gonna go.
Yeah.
for all of us to be in. So is it that like maybe it's freshmen, sophomores are here and then seniors? I don't know how to shake out, but those are the ones we're using. I don't know what's up with De La Salle. He could get
Totally. So we,
Building.
my understanding, is only recommendations
I don't know if he's
based on that. Even.
Yeah, so I want to see the part that
Ends up being part of it.
Well, I think that like that's.
So that for me is interesting.
Upperclassmen.
Oh. Yeah, like,
Taken aback that so version.
What is the field
Is have in classroom to be that's like not a temporary structure.
Oh.
And that's what I was trying to say. I can't believe that's not on the board.
For a long time, we get what's going. Are you sure?
Sure.
Yes, I just
And they put in there some things
The
that.
building's here, the building's here.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
You would have to talk in setbacks.
So I don't, yeah, I just
He had
don't.
students.
Third scenario, considering this, where you're like, some of it's operational and sometimes that's, is it a moment where they're here and it's consistent?
Or like water there.
Well, that's an interesting conversation on what is that. I think that's one of the challenges when we're
Not a version. There's a version where in 1909,
you know, like be a full size basement.
I think that was
What are we reducing the yeah. I mean, without bird coming across me.
Yes, that's what they were thinking about doing with.
However, how is that
a sky bridge?
New thing is to actually house.
Science.
I think that
So.
Yeah, and we're gonna speak to this next one.
What is it about?
I think so.
It's really comprehensive.
New footprint.
So.
So I think there's a lot of options. We've been talking about being a conference for a while.
Sure. I mean, but that's also like,
Well, because
knowing
spaces
hypothetically and situations I
need a teacher. TV studio, we need a teacher. Like, how do we find somebody some swath of able to sit in here with us?
and instead of the different things being in
Teacher would be
sure. It says it's 15. It's like, why don't save 10 and use the 5? Like they have transcripts 5.
It is part of it.
Student services is so big.
Services has been
And it's like you have to go behind a lot of doors.
since it's like 60.
It's not inviting.
Okay, so what we should make student services.
Yeah.
How I go to student services is like,
This is this used to be the, and there's ways of like downside.
Well, and it's like there's no signage to tell you.
They did serve. Like this library, yeah.
and a lot of the things like how
There's that much of it.
That's like a big space.
So this would go, makes sense to do
have
very
to
simple. But that
you have to talk to them, they will tell you prior to me certain side.
Yeah. And even like the office was like this big and it's green on green. Go put my business.
How are you, kid?
Well, and it's interesting because in my conversations about it, I think the answer is sort of no. Because that is what happens, right? Like the landmarks change. And that is a form of that can't somehow get called a thing.
She's like, so excited about her work.
They took down the pyramid. Like,
oh my God.
There's no version. And we can talk about it, but I don't hear that. That's why I'm saying, and part of it is facade, right? Because
but you can't because of all the
you're walking, you're like, man, I remember reading a book. Like if it looks real slick and totally different.
That's how you feel now.
Like, I walked in a building and I thought, I'm so glad that it's improved.
Sometimes I would say, what is it, Roosevelt? I don't know, Roosevelt.
What does it mean?
What's the meaning? And I they were like, oh, this used to be this and this. And I was like,
I have an answer.
Sure.
I don't know what workings out is. So I would say
think
that.
about how,
I mean,
Right, no, I mean, I think there's a similar mood where like, every nuance will be observed by someone. We all know that it's gonna be different, and as mentioned, like just in safety materials, it actually does need to be totally every surface, gone, everything, right? And then like more concrete and steel so it doesn't fall down. So there's a way in which there is no not look similar.
I'm really
Every
curious.
surface is
Like
a
deeper
Yeah.
connection.
So that is
Don't know
the
what
reality of what it means to keep it open.
like to.
Best case scenario. And so I'm partially interpreting it as like stairs, ramps, right? So there's versions of
Jeff's always
internal landscape that
Jeff.
Yeah.
but there's not a
People
version.
talk about Jeff. Everybody knows what they're talking about.
And so there's other layers, right? So there's like and shifting and moving, like even just
Where Jeff is.
so like the bricks are gone, the thing that you stone is gone,
Say
all of
Jeff.
the things that truly cannot be replaced are gone.
Like the
Um, we know that history. I think the other layer
Now,
that's really fascinating.
we're trying to.
We were talking about it in the
Yeah.
brought up that
And people have said that.
if the facade shifts,
Not.
part of what
Because they do.
happens is
30 years ago.
people who identify with this place and have graduated and are funding it or supporting it, the alma maters, they're like, oh, I'm losing my connection to this
But I
thing.
wonder if there's another.
So it's also a severing of all of the things that
building.
in this place, and
Jefferson.
continue to
Best
invest.
build.
It's resetting,
Can't build
and then there's a new community. And
As
then
far
they're
as a
like,
school
oh,
goes.
building is the same community?
Not
No,
the
it's
same.
not. It is already not the same community.
But I think it's.
And so that's why this piece on the table of this larger way, it's not just reckoning the schools in this community. It's reckoning with all of the byproduct, MODA, everything, right? So there's no version where you take the keystone out and it's still the same thing. It just is not, it's really.
Yeah, it is. As a high school, I have a bedtime of 9.
But also.
As a non-high time.
Because you're going from here,
Good for you.
but.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. All good points.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and to me, it's the spatial dimensions and that's to me. That's to me.
I also patched it. Wiki guys.
We do have, you guys have to go.
It's me.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Right.
Love it.
I don't know. And I'm saying.
I'm hearing it. There's an amount that I haven't. And I'm also.
Thank you.
It's coming, something goes on.
In ways we are all part of the process.
And then you're seeing very.
The process is also very.
It is a kid's show.
Yes, where you and I are born.
For me,
But it's like, I'll just kind of.
So there's a lot of post-its on the bottom.
It's a really interesting conversation because it felt that it was focused amongst all of them.
Yeah.
That just staying in this building is not what we want to be doing.
That's why they.
Even if you stay here for say 3 years while I
It's
in the same building. Yeah. just
Like the
all of
woman
them-
who
all-
left earlier
the
was-
three- the three of them, all feel
And I
like
mean, that's
the
just.
same thing. That basically,
And that's like,
it's
that's like.
just don't want to be here.
We don't want to be here. Yeah.
Which is
Take that one, I like all of them.
Yeah. So that's exactly.
Yeah.
You're saying.
It's all the process.
You don't want to be here.
That's
Safe,
it.
comfortable, accessible building.
Transitional moment.
Like that's.
Just like get that out of the way from here.
And it's not like.
It's not disruption, right? Disruption is tied to the culture of heritage and they didn't want disruption.
Culture of heritage isn't necessarily.
No, right.
Because
I think that's what people forget is to actually know.
I thought it was really interesting when you said that question was asked.
I know.
And you're like, well, yeah, it'd be like a Disney member. It's like, well, that's really great. But I think that's the same thing.
I feel like community actually.
Building is meant to encapsulate the same old culture. It's not, they're like not really.
So I know that would be.
And, you know, I heard a story about community and they like didn't get and then they're like, well, we'll just do it. But again, it's separated from the people who are supposed to come and nurture like the next phase. And so that culture is separate.
Right, right.
It'll just be on a different.
Yeah.
Did we just finish everybody with the table?
Yes, they all had to go, and then another gentleman had to put his
Sure.
to bed.
Oh my
and
gosh,
Oh.
what
There's
is
like
that?
kids, yeah, kids have to go to bed. You got good notes, yeah.
That's great, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, oh my
I know, we're
gosh.
just talking about it, so we can still share that, but yeah.
We have to actually.
I mean, kids will come, right? Because like, that's what we talked about, like, kids like.
Great.
Before, some of those.
But 8:30
Look
is
at the kids though.
time.
Yeah. We can
Challenging
talk.
to have a.
Okay, so we're gonna wanna bring the conversation back to the whole group so we can all hear what each group is talking about. Maybe we start with this group this time instead of going in this.
All of our CPO and our CDO.
Well, it looks like you guys took notes.
Yes.
Will you somebody help kind of share what the group did talk about?
Yeah, I think that the takeaway, frankly, you know, as in the first exercise, culture and disturbance were kind of main elements. But at the same time, it became clear that the main concern about the 4 people that we had at the table was the idea of remaining in this building the least amount possible is the most important, meaning that they feel that it's so unsafe and so unwelcoming that they just don't want to be here anymore, even if it means, for example, okay, we'll be here because you're going to be building something new and then we can move into the new space. That, I think, what they felt was actually too much time waiting in the old building while the new building was being built. You know, so at the end of the day, then option B and C, the 2 options that allow for relocation and kind of, it seems, immediate moving out of the existing building was desired. And I think the other piece that all of them felt strongly about was the notion of the track and field remaining in place, because it felt that was such a strong community piece.
So really, 2 and 3 brought those values more than 1.
Yep.
How about this group? Corey or somebody else can help describe what you guys talked about?
So we had kind of a wide-ranging conversation. We didn't prioritize themes.
That's okay.
Kind of the qualities of the existing building that would be worth preserving and what that actually means. So a few discussion topics were, one is the location of the existing building. And the group felt that it made more sense to keep the track and the building in their current relationship, with the track being closer to the Louder Street at Killingsworth and the school being more tucked into the neighborhood, and flipping that might be problematic from a site noise standpoint. So we talked about, does keeping the building, if we prioritize culture and heritage, is that what keeping the building means, or is there other aspects of culture and heritage that can fit into the other schemes, or that are important otherwise? And we also spoke about the idea that there's a certain amount of time in the future when disruption is over, money's been spent, time no longer matters, and what's left is the building for the next 100 years. So making sure that we make the right decision for the long term, maybe prioritizing that over kind of short-term disruption or costs or other issues.
The only thing I would mention that I think that distinction is temporary disruption will be forgotten in a few years, but long-term cultural.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just want to say, we talked a little bit about if we want to preserve one of the buildings, do we preserve it and bring it back to like the exact way it looked in 1909? Do we bring it back to 1965? Do we bring it back to, like, what is preserving the building really mean, from sort of an aesthetics and from the exterior, and what does that mean for, how do we imprint our current sort of life and culture on something that we're trying to then turn into another building again?
Yeah, and we're digging into this right now where we have a historic consultant on this team who's not here today, but they're looking at the building and looking at the facade and trying to understand what's been done to it and what can be taken out and what happens when you tear, what Chandra was sharing, like some of the red or orange or whatever color that is that fills between the windows, like that was added in the 70s or 50s or something. And when you pull that out, what happens, right? Is the brickwork behind it that's really beautiful, that's original, gonna still be intact? Or do we think that's gonna tear it all out and, can we replace it in the same way? That's something we're digging into. And so, work to be done that we'll bring back here and then talk about like what we think are actual things that we could do to this building, what would it look like in the end.
There was also, I'd say that there was a conversation about the absolute lack of accessibility in the existing building complex. We talked about the stairs in the 1909 building, but I think the relationship of that building to the other buildings on the site is super challenging. And the need to bring the building into the 21st century. As we
Yeah,
maybe bring back its history
different
as well.
parts of the buildings are at different levels right now because they're different. They're built in different time periods. I think that's what happened. Anything else from this group? Great thoughts there.
I just have a question that
Yeah.
really I don't think we have this information on yet. Like, what happens to the community partners and some of those aspects of the school in each of these different scenarios?
Yeah, it's something that there's a on the gentleman who's left. There was a question about the health clinic as well, or the special education program earlier. The intention is that the school is going to have in it everything that a comprehensive high school has in it, which is the equivalent to Grant High School or Lincoln High School.
I know, I don't just mean like what's going to happen at the end.
And the special things in and out, including community farms.
Right, no, I don't mean in the end result.
Oh,
I mean in the process.
Oh.
What happens to those things that are existing? Because part of my question is, right, if community partners are now pushed out of during one of these temporary siting things,
Yes.
what disruption does that create to the community that is here right now? And so I don't see that answered here. Like, what happens to
Yes,
community
we haven't.
partners
That's a
throughout
really
this
great
process?
question, and it's one that needs to be.
Should we move on? Are we ready to move on to the last group over here? All right, who wants to?
Well, I don't know that we consensed either. And it's interesting because there was another side of the conversation, so maybe you can chime in. On this side of the table, there was a lot of conversation about, I feel like I learned that in this option, this small kind of rider over here, possible use of 1909 building during construction, it sort of equates these in some ways, which is also interesting because then it just like knocks off time and money from this other version where the saving of these buildings is clearly delineated. But there was a lot of conversation about the actual student body, the number of that in correlation to the goal of 1700, and how whatever displacement event occurs is actually not 1700 displaced students, but actually just the current population. And I was asking a lot of questions and was being discussed both, is there a way to house that group during the cycle of the new building in a secure building throughout, as well as some of the kind of implicit realities where if you erase a monument that has cultural significance to a community, how does that ever create a scenario in which the culture that is stemming from that thing doesn't just go away? And how do you take the richness of the culture that's linked to the brick and mortar building, cornerstone and all, and just insert it in a new place and expect it to somehow be the same? So those came up on this side of the table.
I think the only thing that I felt like was we were using the analogy of root shop and taking root shop. So if you remove a plant from a location and this building is a significant landmark in the community, as we all know, and by placing it within the building, we talk about radiation
images of a person that have this memory of walking through the door, walking through the track. By removing that, or there was an idea of we replace it with like a version, like make it a new version of it. Does it have the same? It's separate. We think it's separate. So yes. So I just wanted to.
I mean, when I was in I think Jen's story about the kids playing in the football game, the little kids, right? Half the people that are there, their kids are there because they were there. They were the ones who played on that field.
Well,
right?
a little more context there. I
Yeah,
think is
okay.
really-
Why don't you tell us?
Sorry, I know you don't want to say this part. So my son plays for the youth program. We were just over in the.
Oh, playing on the field
Yes.
right now?
Yeah,
Yes.
when we were.
Hiring them a week later.
Yes.
Yes.
And so the youth program is a hot mess. And by a hot mess, I mean not just it's disorganized. Kids haven't had the proper practices. They just get equipment. We have a game on Saturday against Lake Oswego. And that's huge, right? Because they're organized. They have resources. And we're all parents, you know, can't believe this happened. Where are the kids? Where are the kids? And then I said, why are y'all here? And they said, I don't know why we're here again. I said, again? They said, yes. I said, well, why are you here? I said, because I'm a dummy. Because my parents were dummies. And as messy as that is on the field, like that's the priority. And that's the priority in the community. So I think that's just like, that was literally why I was late coming in here because we were waiting. I was ready to ask the coach where they've been. So, but I think that's just like, that speaks to like its connection. And I think something else that Michael brought up is that when you remove or change what existed, that connection piece, do you lose everything before? And he compared it to like that is a basic fundamental issue that is faced in gentrification. Is you remove and you start anew. So that linkage, that root, everything is gone. And so we know that Jefferson doesn't have like great donors, right? But however, Jefferson has class of 1960, class of 1970 something, you know, and they're still here. Does that remove that? And what does that mean then for the communities?
So I have a question that I love, Sam, a question that I asked this table, but we didn't really get into it. But I think we can put time.
Yeah, we do.
We can go back. So we've got some historic photographs and we've got some current photographs of the building. The building was altered, I think, in the late 50s. So it has to be really, really old to remember it the way it used to be before it was altered in the late 50s. Should we keep it the way that it is? Or should we try to restore it to what it used to be that nobody remembers?
Is your question like after a certain cycle of time, like there is a loss of memory? Is that what
Is there? I don't know. I mean, this is you know, we all know whose legacy stuff. This is what the building used to look like, and it was. I actually haven't looked at drawings carefully enough to know what the white is. Is it painted wood? Probably, right? And then brick infill panels.
I think so.
And then in the 50s, it was smoothed over. It was plastered over. And we
This is a detail.
yeah.
Encoded.
And you can sort of
Just to
see
make
that it's back.
You can see the
You
diamond
can
shape.
see the shadow, the sort of that palimpsest of that diamond because it's underneath that. But this is what everybody knows.
Who decided in the shift moment?
Who did that?
Yeah, what was the decision making process?
Would you say 1950s?
Yeah, we were. Nobody knows. I mean,
We actually, I did read something that said why it happened, but I don't know if it's true. So in the 50s, there were a couple of new buildings were built, including the theater, and then in the 60s, the gym to the north, the demos, the gym with the donkey on it, and you know that was the mid-century period where history was not respected or admired, and so these fancy new mid-century buildings were built, and they decided to make the whole building kind of bring it up to date and make it look more like the new buildings. So they, get rid of the ornamentation. Yeah.
Is that when the roof went away?
Yeah,
that's when the roof's went
So the roof is actually, the original roof is still on the building. but they built up a parapet.
What?
The flat roof on the top of the building is original. There's quite a lot of there's the original stairs to the flat piece of the roof at the top. That's all original. But what happened, the really serious thing happened is right here over that entry, there was a gabled, hipped roof.
Yeah, there was an image of that.
And it was taken off. We have it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Here, you kind of see a pyramid
Yeah.
roof here.
That was taken.
That was taken off. This is the 1928 gym. This is an old auditorium piece that was original to the building. And after this gym was built, this was taken down, and the building that we're in now was inserted between the 28 gym and the 1909 building. Yeah, and this pyramid roof was flattened, modernized. But all your probably parents, and maybe even their parents knew this. So what was this? And I don't have an answer. I just thought this was really
I
interesting
think it's
question.
really interesting. Is this the building that people remember and are the way it looks? I mean, just based on the surface of what it looks like.
I would say that like it's not so much about the design of the building rather than to maintain a structure of connection. Like when we're thinking about that, like I don't know that is. I mean, when we talk about like to your question, right? Like to when it looks like what?
Yeah.
Right? Because yeah, you can change it on the outside, but I think like more, at least what I'm saying, and I don't know for you, Michael, but is maintaining like that structure, that the connection that a physical thing holds, right? And not just demoing everything. Right? Anyways, not just getting rid of that and starting anew. And I guess like that's more of like where my perspective and input is coming from, rather than I think that's a good question, but I don't know that to that point.
I don't think the ornamentation would, going back to the original ornamentation, would sever the connection of the community.
It's the erasure. That's the part that we were talking about. Is the erasure.
Actual structure itself, but the ornamentation, especially if it was the original ornamentation, I don't think it would sever the connection.
Do you need the original? It's not so much that it severs it. Let's call it restoring to what it looked like that. What people want to see.
Is that going to upset people in the community if the school suddenly looks like a 1909 building instead of a 1950s modernized building?
That they went to, what it looked like when they went to.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling is that it's not necessarily about what it looks, it's more about like what it is. There's something like a little bit more spiritual to it, right? Of like, these were the bricks that have always been here, and sure, they might be painted a different color or look a little different, but these are the bricks that were here when I was here. These are the bricks that were here when my ancestors, when the generations before me were here. And that
this is the space that was occupied.
This is the space.
It's the landing,
Is it
right? It's like this is where we existed within this space.
Within this space, yeah. And it's not necessarily a question of like trying to get back to 19. I mean, maybe it's even like, hey, maybe we just modernize the outside so it looks, you know what I mean?
It's not so literal.
Well, I was kind of wondering that. This isn't about the experience of the inside, the experience of approach, entry, the scale of the building, the natural light in the classrooms, the scale of the classrooms, and the height of the hallways, the places that you gather inside, and the places on the site that you gather near it. Is that what matters? And we don't have to answer it now.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting litany of curiosities, because it starts to like bring into like valuation of like how much light versus how much space versus, and I think that part of it lives in the facade question as well, is that's not necessarily, does not equate to what is being discussed, can be lost. I think there's some other interesting layers where you were talking about the copper tone facade where you can still see the diamond.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing is that you can actually still see the thing that was there.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I asked who was responsible for making that change. I don't know if, I mean, we're talking, it seems like this is even is the process of enhancing community buy-in and how these processes go. But if we were talking about 70 years ago, I'm not sure that the entire Black community was like, hey, let's do this because this is good for us. I don't know, and so I will not make the claim as to whether or not it happened that way or not. And so I think, to Cleo's point, that nuance may have relevance, and there may be maybe a 50-50 split, and we flip a coin, and we're like, okay, old facade. But that's really different than saying, like, is it this building or that building or not at all? And I wanted to tell a story for those who may or may not know. I have not walked around this building I've been seeing Keystone in this group. I realized it's a cornerstone. And at Highland School, the cornerstone says Highland School. For those of you who don't know, that modern day King is Highland School. And the school was renamed by a student-led initiative. Right, and this student-led initiative was the first ever student-led initiative to rename their school post the assassination of King. And this history, I'm teaching this history to students inside this school because they don't know. And so part of what we're grappling with is the students who occupy the school were not indoctrinated into the culture outside of football and the places that they were. But when we're talking about facade that's missing, but I guess the gist of it is if we get rid of the cornerstone, we are moving a giant piece of marble off of the grounds in which it should be. That, I don't know how to reconcile that as commiserate with certain qualities. Like I think if we lost light in the classrooms, but we kept certain other elements, that wouldn't be a concern. So they're hard to equate. I'm just answering the question more than I'm like antagonizing the question.
And actually, it's a nice segue into something although actually no, I think we were rain checking the renaming. But Co-Locate is developing a report for baseline and ground setting. I've heard that before, something I didn't know. This school hasn't always been called the Thomas Jefferson High School. Does anybody know what it used to be called? For a year. Oh, that was pretty cool.
So last time we had 5 groups, and in the the earlier exercise, pretty much all the groups had cultural heritage as their top issue, right? Consideration. So, and then I think we're hearing this very same thing in this discussion.
Yeah.
So we had other plans for CPC 4, but we are actually really wanted to continue the conversation we're just having about what are the things that are important. Is it being in the hallways? Is it a certain event? Is it looking at the building? All of those things that we were just trying to dig into. We're going to really spend a lot of time on that at CPC 4, which is in 2 weeks. And talk about ways that, is it about the bricks? Like, if you were to build a new building, could we somehow, reuse the bricks? Or how can we, how are there ways? Maybe there is none and nobody wants that, but I think it's worth a discussion as to think about what are the possibilities of both keeping the building and also building new. So I think it's really, a key part of what we need to talk through. And I think it's a longer conversation than we had time for today. And we realized we didn't have time last time either. So we're going to dedicate the majority of the building and the meeting to that topic. Today we heard quite a lot that we don't understand. Most of you don't understand what's in a comprehensive high school. So we are going to talk about that next time and brief you on what that means, so that you have that understanding. So those are
comprehensive plus.
It's comprehensive plus, yes. And we're going to explain that in more detail. Rebecca will.
The other thing that we discussed, because we wanted to know, what about other high schools? What have they done? And so thinking about, there was a mention of Grant kept an existing building, Lincoln complete, and can we understand, what did that mean for them? And maybe that's not necessarily you all have to present that, but maybe it's an information packet that we have to ingest and then we can have a discussion around. But I think that's really important to understand, what were the trade-offs within that conversation, so that we have context and some kind of informed thinking as we think about what these options are.
Really well put, and our intention is to organize tours
of examples of those. To invite his to
Maybe even here, because there were people who said they've never even.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, is it David?
Dan.
Dan, that left, he said he's never walked around this building, so it's hard for him to understand what we think about saving the building. He doesn't have the context.
Yeah, high school's a big, complicated, confusing thing.
Yeah. So some tours, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have another question about timing. I watched the first version of this at home. And so I came to participate this time, but I was able to watch. And somebody brought up, whoever it was off camera, thank you, brought up the issue of timing. And it came up again, I think, when you were sharing these things too, right? It's hard to do this iterative process in such a compressed time frame. And I'm definitely feeling that with like the community that I'm trying to reach out to. I feel like I'm like, I can't just like shove this down people's throats and then say, here, feedback. And so there was this question about like, I appreciate that there has been some adjustments to this one, so that I felt there's more time in this meeting itself. But like, is the process itself, is there flexibility in that or is there not? Because if there isn't, I feel really hamstrung, because it's like, I don't feel like I can get honest feedback. I don't feel like I can get honest communication in the 2 months that we have left on this timeline. So if it's not, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels a little bit. But if it is, then that's good to know too, that we could lean into more human engagement. So is there,
Steve, is there a response from OSM to that comment about time? I'm not asking you to say yes, we can add time, but obviously your design team can answer that. So how do we establish a response?
Well, I think in particular, as we kind of considering two options, which each have their own kind of schedule impacts, I think that's maybe something we can kind of share a little bit of background about, because I think we focused on the construction timeframe. But I think maybe something we can look at is planning plus design.
Yes.
Because it's not just the next few months, it's like the next 2 years. And there's still ongoing discussions about what the next 2 years will be in terms of planning plus design and the requirements of every one of those steps that comes up. So I think that's something we can maybe break out a little bit just to start to have that conversation, because to some extent I think we have this question mark for a lot of people as to what happens, not just for the next few months, but over the next years before we actually begin construction.
well, I guess like and maybe this is what you're distinguishing between planning and design, and I just don't understand that distinction there, but like this schedule has cost review and selection on November 16th. Like, what is that's a lot. Like, what is being decided by then, and what is my opportunity to actually truly authentically engage community with feedback in 2 months? And so.
Well, I think if we can put it into context, part of it is what's, at least currently, what's driving some of the states, which actually extends even beyond November into December and what happens after that. Because I think just having that broader conversation, kind of look at it the same way we're looking at it. There's obviously in it, like everything else, there's trade-offs. Like what we extend it further, what does that impact down? So it's a lot of our team's discussion. It's kind of, so, and we hear exactly that. I think we can maybe more clearly kind of spell out not just your role, but what happens after that decision is made. What does that lead to? So you can start to see a little bit of what's possible.
I think that would be helpful to get a sense of like where we have potential to have growth. Because you're right, I do also hear like the pressure, right, of like the longer this goes, the longer people are in a building that they don't fit.
Yeah, the two aspects of time which are in opposition to one another in some ways. Yes. Thank you for raising that. should we just quickly go through? I think we're not going to read it, I don't think. But so we're sort of in our end game here. Thank you for your patience. At the beginning of the CPC 3.1, Keisha, who's with us over here, very valiantly read out the land acknowledgement and the anti-oppression statement. It's 2 pages, and I think with permission we want to do it now, and that's we should. What do you think? Just because I'm tired doesn't mean we shouldn't read it. Can we read it?
A lot of our groups talked about ties to place.
Yeah.
And community.
I think we should end the meeting reading it. And I mean, I don't think we have much more to do.
We don't actually. So Bruce, look at that. What's our next slide was the chair and co-chair piece, and then the renaming. At the last meeting, there was this very poignant relationship between the anti-oppression statement and the renaming process. And you can go to the recording of it and hear that. Should we talk about co-chair first and then go back and read it?
Yeah, let me. It's an administrative thing, so I just want to make sure, and then we can kind of.
I think it would be nice to kind of end the meeting.
And I'm just going to confer with Keisha about who's going to read this.
Yeah. So I'm just going to open up a quick other tab. You know what I'm going to do? Can people read that? Or is that too small?
Tiny.
Okay, I will go out of present mode and just zoom in a little bit. So this was kind of part of a discussion we had after, I think what we acknowledged was kind of an accelerated process early on to kind of select or kind of nominate and select the chair and co-chair. So we had a discussion with Jen and Mary about kind of restarting the process and reframing it, frankly, just to kind of give more background. So I will share this electronically, so I won't kind of go through it in detail, but we're going to have a process to reinitiate the selection of the chair and co-chair, have people kind of nominate themselves, and we'll have an online forum to do that process. But basically, I wanted to highlight some of the important aspects in the charter, just having to do with how it's defined currently, the role of the chair. A lot of it is in some ways kind of what you'd expect kind of administratively, helping discussing agendas, presentation review, discussing kind of the topics that will come up in steering committee, or actually, sorry, wrong direction, helping steer or helping discuss the sequence of meeting topics with the project team. But I think the important thing that particularly we discussed with Jen was that there was not an understanding or sort of a supportive structure about meeting protocols. So that's an important thing that kind of part of the role of the chair. So part of it that we discussed internally was that, just for your knowledge, that the project team itself is largely kind of facilitating meeting discussions, and you can kind of observe that happening. And the chair really plays more of an assisting role in meeting protocols. But then coming up with a sense of how in particular are meeting protocols kind of administered. So obviously there's kind of a general approach that people are familiar with, the majority rule, that we would kind of select alternatives that have a majority or more than half the votes. But I think where we landed, and I think it's a lot of the approach that you see in these meetings, is that we're really kind of focused on more of a consensus-based process in which, you know, everyone's kind of having these more open discussions. We're always trying to get the opinion of every side of an issue and not just kind of making these kind of blanket decisions. So I think a lot of what we talked about with the use of consensus-based process, the benefits of it include collaboration, cooperation, egalitarianism, inclusion, and participation. So I think part of it is to kind of hopefully put people's mind at ease that this is not this sort of, the chair is not playing the role of kind of administering meetings or kind of following kind of Robert's rules or things like that, that it's very much kind of assisting with the process and helping kind of come up with this consensus-based approach. But it's also up to the chair and members to kind of help us kind of decide how some decisions get made or how kind of come to a consensus about that. So I will, just to wrap this up, I will share a copy of this as part of the process of kind of asking people to, if they decide to volunteer to become the chair, and then we'll have a list that we'll share with everyone in an online form that people can help make that selection. And part of it too is like, we want people to have the time and space to kind of, if you're interested in volunteering for this role, we want you to have the time and space to describe kind of what your interests are, why you think this would be, you kind of be a good candidate for this role. So.
Can I add?
Yes, please do.
For this?
Yes.
So Mary and I were very adamant that there should be Black representation, and that there should be youth representation, and that I think both of us are willing to support whoever. But in terms of like leading, I think those most impacted, we both believe those most impacted should be in those positions to help drive conversation to ensure those nuanced perspectives is considered. So I just
Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, that you don't have to digest any of this yet. We'll share all that. You'll have a chance to think about it, and we'll have kind of a process for that selection process.
It's been close on the.
Oh, sorry.
Not all the words are, maybe you could change it so, because
Okay.
otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
You're reading it off your phone.
Yeah, I'm reading
that
it
might
off
be
here.
okay.
Eyes on my
Yeah,
face.
she's okay.
Land acknowledgement and anti-oppression statement. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. The symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the First Peoples of our collective homes. This statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all of us to reflect on our current day relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Cathlamet, Tualatin, Malawa. We also know that many other tribes made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. Let us also acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes of the area, the Grand Ronde, Siletz, and Cowlitz. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking more opportunities. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 different tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. This acknowledgement is one step that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those that have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa, whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. The two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can begin to heal.
Okay, so that is the foundation. We'll be bringing that to each meeting as we start. And in 2 weeks, we'll come together at the CPC 4. So the whole group will come together will be a logical at that meeting. And we'll lead into a conversation with Jeannie just introduced you, and we will also add a piece about the program component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take some snacks home.
Yeah.
Please take a couple of few things. Yeah, you too. All right, Jackie.
Thank you.
Here, we're gonna make sure.
No. Buy less if you want.